Thank you. Thank you. Expertise is a vague word, so I appreciate that. With your previous speaker, Bruce, there, again, he came and, as I did as well yesterday, and saw the sun dogs. I appreciate that. He enjoyed them more than I did because I'm relatively aware that there's a reason that those are out there, okay, and that means it's a little bit brisk. But different, just a little bit before we start out, is that, again, home base for me now is North Dakota State University and the University of Minnesota. I have a joint appointment. I grew up in South Dakota, but in fact, and as I tell people that I have the opportunity to be here at Gray Bruce Farmers Week, is that they say, oh, it's going to be cold, right? That's obviously the idea. But I know that it's been just a little bit brisk everywhere. And in fact, relative to latitude, I went south, okay? Not everybody realizes that as I moved from North Dakota, right, Lori? I mean, I traveled south. So I'm pretty much a destination vacation here in Elmwood, all right? And so, I appreciate again the chance, and I'll be here as well tomorrow and touch on a few more things on the sheep and lamb industry. And Lori gave me a little bit of the leeway to identify some things to talk about on our goat day here today. And so I touch on a few things, and in fact, we will see at the end of our portion that I have allotted here of if I get these accomplished on evaluating cost of production and also on marketing strategies as we talk about it from a goat producer standpoint. But I'm relatively convinced that given the topic that we have at hand on cost of production and marketing strategies, that maybe now is the time that's better than ever as we look at it. And so as we talk about it and you listen there, relative to the inventory that we have and to prices that we have and managing our operations, I just think it's important and it's critical to have as much of a grasp as we can. And so many times, and depending what you are, and based on an inventory like the talented young lady brought at the beginning of whether you're a small operation that is focusing on different types of products, different types of niches with those goats, or if you are the largest one that helps and has a little bit more control relative to supply management. Of course, from a dairy standpoint, you're a little bit different here from a production and a quota approach than we are in the United States of America. And as I talked with some individuals in the U.S. and the free market system and the good and the bad and the ugly or whatever that may be. But again, those are things that you could probably be able to evaluate within your own operations. But at the end of this, I hope that I provide some ideas for you to think and provide some thoughts and some brainstorming along the way. And so it's a big task that I think I'm going to try to accomplish. But as we discuss initially on goat production parameters, and I think that there's some things that you've asked yourself earlier in your operation or in the evolution of your farming operation of moving forward. Is one of those is, why do you want to have goats, okay? And in fact, I'm certainly impressed with the turnout and attendance that we have here in the room. But you've also made some of those decisions, okay? And so who is interested? Who wants to tell me why they have goats? Great! We will have way more people in the sheep one tomorrow. Make money, okay? Make money is the first one, all right? Who else? They got personality. I don't think there's any doubt with that, okay? Certainly there's personality involved, all right? I'm going to get to at least 4, so I need 2 more. I like that. They're at a size that the whole family can work with. Okay, who wants the last one?
Too expensive to get into cows.
Yes! Yes, okay. So we had money, we had personality, okay? We had something that they work from a family standpoint, and too expensive to get into cows, okay? I'm fine with all that, all right? And as you saw, the first one was money, all right? And so again, that will be a focus of ours, or profitability, all right? Personality, we'll call that, every audience has to have a hobby farmer. Thanks for being token, all right? Just kidding, but certainly goats do have personality. I think those other two are great as well, and in fact, relative to being able to have the family involved, okay? And again, I grew up more so on a cattle and sheep operation, but when you're younger, you can still work with some goats. And we had a few goats as well, but certainly not probably the levels that you guys do. Cost of entry, okay? That one's great. Cost of entry, it costs a lot more to have a cattle operation in terms of the cows, in terms of the land, to be able to accomplish that. And so that's a really, really good portion of it. Now, what are your production goals? And again, actually this presentation will focus probably a large part on that question in a generality standpoint. Because if we don't know what those goals are, we're going to have a tough time identifying our measurements of progress. So, okay, what are our production goals? What are we making? Let's get to 3 here. Milk, okay, that was milk was 1. What else we got? What's that? Components. So of the butter fats and improving the quality of our milks, right? Okay. What else? Meat, okay. And so meat was potentially what I thought maybe would be one that would come up as well. Again, I'll talk just a little bit as well on fibers is an option that we have on goats, okay? Fibers isn't really a good option on cattle, okay? Yet, I mean, we still make leather, but we don't really make it very often in our backyards, okay? Now, we do have that option relative to fiber, okay? And, all right, for those of you, and again, I suppose you could milk them as well, but if you have some Nigerian dwarfs, maybe it's companionship, all right? Or if you have fainting goats, maybe it's for entertainment value. I don't know, all right? But whatever you so choose on what you're producing there. Milk, and more importantly, components of those milks that you can get paid on, right? Okay? So several of the different themes are going to come from profitability. A portion of this will come from meat as well. Now realize, and I don't particularly say this in a dairy goat audience, but I think it's important as well. When you think of it from the dairy cow standpoint or that portion, that's one of the things where in my previous world, we had to realize that those dairy cows or those spent dairy cows that were in consumption still make it into beef, okay? And realize that as we have a meat animal, that certainly that is a part. Maybe that's not the largest part of our economic income, but it certainly is one. How much will it cost to raise goats? We'll talk about that, but in fact, more so than that, I want to identify some tools and some resources and then challenge you, because nobody's going to have the same differences or same numbers on how much it's going to cost. We have 2.6 million goats in the U.S., okay? And what was the number on Canadian goats now? What's the most current number? That was part of your quiz. Pardon? 20%? 40%, okay? Yeah. And so, but there is, I think, some opportunities potentially as we look for it, and if there wasn't, you certainly wouldn't be here as well. Now, most of you guys have already made that decision of identifying that you're interested in the goat species and in generalities to try to move forward, but I think of it big picture enough that we identify those production goals, okay? And if we look at those, like I said, that was going to be a key component, and identifying how we can get there. Okay, and so, again, I'm not expecting everybody to have a free scratch pad or a pen, but let's be real, we're at a trade show, so you guys probably have like 3 or 4 pens in your pockets already, okay? But at least you grab some. So, if we could think of things that there are for those goals for our operation. And this certainly isn't revolutionary, but I think it was fun to put it down on and evaluate it to just see how we could try to get there in a specific goals, okay? So can anybody name a specific goal that they may or may not have? Higher production per animal, okay? Good. And so I like that, all right? I like the specific production. But in order to make progress, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit, is that we need to identify what that is. If it's the 1.2 liters or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever that may be, relative to if European dairy group producers are just a little bit ahead of us. But identifying the specific thing that we can do. Since we know that the higher milk production, again, is the thing that we are going to evaluate here per doe, then we have to know that it's measurable. Is that a measurable goal? Absolutely, all right? See, we nailed it, all right? Relative to our example, we nailed it. We can be able to identify that and be able to identify it then. Is it how many that you're milking on that day? Is it how many that are exposed? Is it the whole operation? You define the parameters that work best for you to be able to accomplish that from a measurable standpoint. Okay, can it be done? Okay, can we reach an attainable goal? Absolutely. If you're at 2 liters per doe, okay, per day, well, maybe the next step is 2.2, okay? Maybe the next step is 2.4, whatever that may be. So you identify what those are from an attainable standpoint to make some improvements and make some progress in what you want to accomplish. Can it be realistic and can it be reached? Rewarding. So a goal that is rewarding. Now, as I talked about what goals there were, okay, and again, I think if we were to do this all again, you guys would fight, and it'd be, the first one would have been profit, money, profit, or something like that, okay? But that is something that certainly is important. But I put this in here as well as rewarding, okay? And because I think in agriculture, and again, I grew up in agriculture and certainly am still in it and appreciate the chance to interact with a lot of people, but I think we have to believe that our job and what we do is rewarding. Can we agree with the nod of a head? Okay, that's cool, all right? See, most of the people are nodding their head after lunch. It'll be the same thing for a different reason. All right, so we've got you on board and rewarding. And from a family standpoint, and so our talented attendees said that this is important from a family standpoint. I totally agree, okay? I got the opportunity to be in that. I'm the eldest of 4, and certainly my youngest sibling and sister, Lacey, is at home making it happen, is what I call making agriculture happen. And so I think it is rewarding, and as you guys think of it, again, maybe even generational transfer or wherever that may be with your goals. The 5th and final thing is identifying the time limit, okay? So we're saying that we are going to improve the amount of milk produced or improve the components of the milk that is produced. We're going to identify an attainable goal. We're going to figure out a timeline that we can do it. Hopefully it'll be rewarding because we're doing and making progress. And I think that there's value to even improving those numbers for us from a standpoint of just continuous improvement. Continuous improvement's a slogan that I personally enjoy, and just continuing to try to get better no matter what you're trying to do. Okay? This one's way too easy of a slide, but it's okay, all right? So we have a SWOT analysis. Those of you that are talented know what those mean, right? So the first one for 2 fake extra bonus points, all right? What's the first one? All right. See, I knew that we had a talented group. Okay, so discussing initially there, particularly the dairy goat, but we'll also move into some meat goats portion as well. But the strength. So what is the strength of Ontario goat production? No quota. Okay, so you can make as much as you want. Yeah. Okay, you got vetoed by the way. But at least not a specific quota. Is that fair? Okay. So I would say, to the best of my knowledge, okay, right or wrong, yeah, now we've got, that's the good thing of having a large audience, and maybe this is strength, maybe this is a weakness, but there's an infrastructure in Ontario, right? Right, if I'm in northern Manitoba, okay, and I was rocking out as a dairy goat person, I don't know if anybody would come, okay? Because I'm relatively aware that there's at least more dairies and more goat production in this portion of Ontario than there is in other provinces, right? Okay, and so I think infrastructure is a huge strength because at least, and I know that we have 2, maybe 3, whatever that is in terms of purchasers from a dairy goat standpoint, but there's potentially other places where it'd be a lot tougher, okay? Or the distance to merchandise those are at least a lot farther away. And no doubt that's, to my personal opinion, on a dairy goat standpoint, the most challenging issue is that if you have a processor that provides a limitation on expansion or even profitability, okay? So at least we have that opportunity. All right, so we nailed it. We got at least a strength or 2. All right, your turn. All right? What's next? What are we going to say? What's the weakness? No quota. Awesome. No quota, all right? Good. All right, and as I understand, all right, the prices based on the current amount of quantity isn't as shiny as what you would prefer, okay? And particularly, again, and as I look at this, in my personal mind, more so looking at a U.S. Cow milk, all right, in terms of just differences and fluctuations. I know that there's been plenty of times where it took a talented banker that believed in them, all right? Because there's lots of times from that standpoint where you're producing milk that's below your break even and losing money every single month, okay? Now, if we can identify those and identify where we're at, maybe we can sharpen that pencil just a little bit, hone it, and potentially look at some of the opportunities that we may have, all right? So I'm very, much more trusting than I probably should with this audience, all right? What's the next one in terms of an opportunity? All right. National champion breeding Nigerian dwarfs, all right? I don't know. I don't even know where I get some of my brainstorms, okay? But some of our opportunities is that if those operations aren't working you to go mass production, or if you have a smaller operation, okay, is there an opportunity to sell milk shares? Is there an opportunity to move towards a mini processing that you can be able to accomplish to make the different soaps? Is there an opportunity to shift from, even though there would be a difference in infrastructure, from dairy to meat? I know that we have some, we'll talk about that. Is there a shift to cashmere goats for entertainment value, okay? I'm not convinced that's as lucrative of an option, okay? And in fact, fiber goats, at least fiber goats in the United States, has taken a very large digger relative to just mohair values of Angora goats. There used to be an Angora goat, you know, in every corner and every tree stand in it, or where if there was a tree in Texas, it was hiding out behind it, all right? Those don't exist anymore, okay? They've shifted from goats as well, but there are some opportunities. Hopefully I'll at least provide a little bit of thought process as well. Threats, okay? What's the threats? Spain, okay? Imports, absolutely okay. And again, I told you that I'm a little bit outside my box relative to goat milk, okay? More of my focus would be on U.S., obviously, and a lamb focus. But American lamb, okay? And we think, oh, we got to be bigger and we got to be better and we need to... More than half of the supply that is merchandised in America on lamb comes from Australia and New Zealand. So we face the same challenges, or very similar challenges. Imports are exactly a challenge, okay? And as I understand, and potentially a challenge from a quality standpoint, and no doubt in terms of the availability of what supply would go through the system. Okay, and now also be careful, because I said that strengths was infrastructure of our operations, but what if a threat is that, you know, if we say that we have 2 processors, what if we have 1? Okay, that's scary. Okay, that's a challenge that is personally a threat for me. Okay, I threw this in here partly because, as you may realize, I'm a optimist. All right, and some people say that their glass is half empty or half full. I've actually been told that Travis's glass is 3/4 full. Okay, and so I believe that there is some opportunities for you, and potentially when those challenges are tougher and when we don't have the understanding of those pricing mechanisms, maybe those are times that we can be just a little bit better at what we're doing, and we can look at the different production decisions that we do have. Now, again, I didn't say that my focus for today's portion of your exciting goat day was to evaluate all of these. And in fact, I'll take it a little bit more refined than this, certainly. But you've already made some decisions in terms of breeded goat, okay? How many goats, all right? And we talked about quota, and if it said, hey, I got 80, maybe I should milk 200. I don't remember exactly what the numbers were. But again, there's some talks that you do from that standpoint. Also, from a facility standpoint, now understand relative to our dairy portion and our production management that facilities is critical, okay? And obviously, so is the labor resources that we have. But if we were to talk about it from a boar goat standpoint and a meat goat standpoint, our facilities obviously not quite as critical, okay? If we have some shelter and some shed and some feed, all right, I think we could do that. And we also know, young gentlemen, that it's probably a little bit cheaper in terms of entry fee than it is to be in the beef cattle industry. Okay? Predator control. And so when I talk about sheep and or goat production, if I don't talk about predator control as a potential threat, all right, I failed. Because, at least, from where I'm at, all right, coyotes enjoy small ruminants, all right? And so that makes it a little bit more challenging. And if you don't have at least some plan or some identification that maybe it's a dog, maybe it's a llama, maybe it's fences, whatever that so works for you, that we can go from lots of goats to very few goats, all right, and too small of a time, okay? And so, again, we're not going to focus on that, but obviously something that if I don't touch on, I feel is that I'm remiss to looking at the whole picture. Nutrition of our animals, again, and of course genetics first, nutrition followed by animal health and accomplishing that. I'm going to touch on a few things on hopefully our marketing as well within this portion of our talk. So I throw this up here again to provide you just a little bit of a visual, and I'm certainly that you're aware of those as well. Excuse me. So with this, and I have a little bit of an idea, but of our audience, how many are dairy focused? Okay, good. And how many are meat goat focused? All right, good. And how many are fiber focused? Well, that's what I figured, but the answer, as the video pans, that's a 0. I counted them for him. All right, and who has entertaining goats? All right, no, I'm just kidding, but certainly those can be again, and like we said as well, from a family standpoint, we have that option. So I would presume that was 2/3 to 3/4 dairy focused, and then 1/4 to 1/3 meat goat focused, and at least in this portion of Gray and Bruce County, all right, the Angora goat is not nearly as prominent as it is in some places. So big picture, and again, isn't anything too revolutionary, but as we think about our production system, those that come from farms and identifying, collecting all those together, and a lot of the times, obviously from a meat animal standpoint, those will potentially go to auction barns, right? Okay, and if I'm correct, I was told that potentially one of the closer ones is Cookstown, is that right? Yes, maybe. Okay, good. All right, and so at least you have a location that you can take those. You have an understanding of where that milk can go, right? Okay, and so, Bruce, is there mainly 2 places that purchase milk?
There's basically 2 buyers.
2 buyers.
And parallel right now.
Okay. And then from my thought process, which as you can tell is a little bit out here, all right? Again, my parents had a tough time keeping me, and I didn't draw very well on coloring, okay? But I think of it big picture that the retail stores and our food service operations are really important, okay? And I know that was touched on a little bit because if we think about it from a goat milk standpoint, okay, what are we doing? What are we producing? How are we getting there? And also from a goat meat standpoint, because it is our customers that we're being able to evaluate. I figured if you wanted the update in terms of Canadian goat numbers, you would provide those individuals, and probably maybe you will later. But this is where our dairy goat numbers are in the United States, with the initial or largest sector in Wisconsin, followed by California, and then Iowa and Texas. Okay, but Wisconsin is the largest relative to our dairy goats. I also put in a meat goat slide to let you know, and again, you probably are aware of this, but from a meat goat standpoint, most of those goats, and again, more of them are more boar influenced now, okay, are in Texas. And in fact, obviously, 6-7-fold more than even Tennessee, Oklahoma, and California, with that increasing in Texas from our meat goats. And that's certainly not new. This is our most recent data and numbers. I grabbed this from your AgriCorp information of the fair market values, and I think if we look at it and we're evaluating our goals and we've identified those goals, is that the next step, in my personal opinion, is to evaluate the resources that we have. Okay, and so those resources that we have, and I'll show you on a couple slides later I tried to identify some of those direct costs and some of those that we could look at. But if we don't look at feed, all right, Jillian, as our primary challenge, okay, I think that that's fair because feed is a large part of our expenses. Agreed? Okay? And in fact, for those of you in the room, okay, you can even determine if labor is your number one expense, okay? But the challenge is, and this is probably bigger, but the challenge is that sometimes we don't even account for our own labor, okay? And so some of the times we don't even think that we'll pay ourselves for the time. We just figured, you know what? Let's pay our expenses. Let's look at where we're at, okay? And so you can identify if that's something as well, but no doubt in terms of the input that goes to the animal, that feed stuff is obviously going to be your largest challenge. So this was 2016, over the average of 2016, value per ton. And again, these are your Canadian numbers of wheat at approximately 195, okay, oats 229, corn 190, 159.50, all right, silage as you see lower, okay, and making those comparisons. And making those comparisons relative to formulations of diets. And again, I think you'll have more talented people that will focus on that and how nutrition can and is important of balancing those rations. But the first thing is to identify which ones that you have available for your operations and how you can move forward on making those selections and making those rations, particularly from a dairy standpoint. They're a high refined, kind of high maintenance kind of a unit, all right? You provide a total mixed ration, or you provide forages and grains that work for them, okay? They're putting out quite a bit of milk for us. Now, just big picture, and again, I'll step on this, of just managing what you can measure, because we're going to aim for a benchmark, okay? And then identifying those. So we identified some of our goals, but aiming for that benchmark and figuring out what we can accomplish. So marketing ability, kids weaned per doe from a meat goat standpoint would be more important, okay? Milk quantity and quality, and if we can minimize feed costs. Now, the difference is that I can talk up here and provide you different examples, but unless you take those examples and evaluate it and try to figure out what it is for each year, okay, or each group, it'll be interesting or more challenging to compare if you're getting any better, okay? So I don't know if 2017 was the best you've ever done, but might I challenge you this from an input standpoint? Do you know if you were even better than the year before? Did you use more feed? Was it because the winter was longer, okay? And so those are some challenges, as fact, as well. My family in South Dakota, okay, we battled. It was our turn, all right, to take on a little bit more of a drought than we preferred last year, okay? So we're going to set, the highest outputs? Probably not, okay? Is it going to cost more to potentially do it in terms of the same amount of gas driving over the fields to get a smaller amount of hay and resources? Yeah, okay. The return on investment, not going to set a record. Was that environmentally focused? Certainly, okay. Did we have an impact on it? Okay, probably not that time, but again, that's why you try to keep these. So I like to put this, okay, we work hard at what we're doing, and I hope that nobody wakes up and says, man, I'm going to give a half effort today. Okay, I hope we don't do that, all right? But sometimes that may be what happens. Define good job. What's good job? And I put that last one in there, and again, to bring it back into in terms of enjoyment and family, okay? Because I think that's important too as well about how you can accomplish that. I have a couple scenarios and production examples that we can look at for us as well. So one of those production examples, and again, you guys know to be 100% on this, okay? You guys know more about dairy goat production than I do, all right? But relative to putting together some of that meat goat options, let's say that we have 25 does, all right? Now maybe these numbers are even too high. If we had 232% kitty crop, okay, that'd be pretty wild. That'd be pretty good. We have 49 offspring for sale because we had 1 buck, 25, okay, we had 58 born. We culled 5 does, all right, 1 doe died, 2 kids perished along the way. How many did we wean? We weaned 56% of them. We kept 6 replacements, all right. Out of that 56, we have 49 of them for sale. Okay, so can I make money on those, all right? depending on where it is, what we can accomplish. Now, in order to have that example and have that comparison is that you're going to have to make some assumptions. Okay, you can read through these for the most part, but you would have to custom and identify these to be able to see where you're at. You're going to raise your replacement does, you're going to pass your feed, okay? You're going to rotationally graze, you're going to have a confinement fed during the winter, you're going to purchase some hay and grain, you're going to sell them at 70 to 90 pounds, pasture fence, equipment, building, transportation costs, okay? You identify those in terms of your example. You write those rules, okay? That's not for me to accomplish. You get to write those rules and determine where that is for you. Now, here's the challenge, okay? And again, this is something that I wanted to at least provide so that it's potentially available if we upload these files or this information. I believe this is from Penn State University of a document that you could put. Now, you could customize these, and some of these are out there. Not very many, but there's some that are out there to customize these documents and look at where we are on the items most critical to economic success. Because when I talked about goals, remember, money was the first thing that was shouted out, right? So, milk sales, does culled, male kids sold, replacement sold, put those numbers in there. You can change your price as it so fits. Variable costs on concentrates, hay, milk, all right? And then those are our feed costs, other variable costs, building and equipment, bedding, miscellaneous, breeding fees, health programs, milk testing, gasoline, milk hauling, marketing, and interest on our operating capital, and you can identify those, okay? So, whether you like it or not, who has this filled out? Okay, outstanding, boom, whoa, nice, we nailed it. I had to look around, but we got to 2, okay? All right, and so I'm considering you guys pretty progressive, but this is the difference. And in fact, if I go home and I talk with my grandpa and my dad and my youngest sister and say, okay, how much does it cost to run a cow, okay, their answer will be whatever was in the local agriculture periodical as the average, okay, because it's tougher to get that information. Now, I'm not saying that we have all the answers, but if we don't benchmark that, then it's tougher to move forward. Sample meat goat budgets. Kids, okay, cold does, bucks, okay, our income. So obviously we don't have our milk sales and our meat goats. Variable costs should be the same. Boom, hay, feed, minerals, vet, marketing, fuel, labor, interest. Fixed charges with land, depreciation, repairs, insurance, and interest, okay? And so you can be able to identify those, and at least you can be able to have a better understanding. Also, additionally, as we are well aware, if we are interested in providing opportunities for bankers to believe in us, right? Is that good? Jason, is that okay from a lending standpoint? Providing opportunities for bankers to believe in us, okay, is that we are at least going to want to have this information to say that, you know, if things go right, we'll be okay, okay? They kind of like that, all right? So I have a little bit and just 2 slides on here, and in fact, as I told Lori, if you wanted this information, again, this is Ontario Goat that did this research, to the best of my knowledge, on the cost of production for your goats. And so if you wish to request more information, or you can be able to find that documentation online and be able to read it for yourself, is that they broke these out. And there were 17 farms that they did evaluate. And this was back from a little bit more historical on the cost of production, or more break even. From a liter standpoint, it was $1.37 per liter. 2015, $1.30 per liter, okay? Top 20% of people were just a little bit better as well. There was an updated one that I saw with the 2016 information, okay? And it had the net revenue of $34,000. And in fact, of the return, and again, I'm just summarizing just a little bit as well, but it was revenue of approximately $1,119, okay, per doe. Right, Bruce, is that logical? $1,100. Can you sell $1,100 worth of milk per doe? Or at one time you could?
At one time you could. I'm just looking at my own operation. We milk 1,200 goats, and so it's 1.2 million in milk sales. So it's at least 1,000.
Yep. Boom. All right, 1,067. I did that. I'm not certain that was exactly correct, but 1,100 is very logical. Okay. So 1,100 in terms of revenue from that dairy goat is very logical, and so that makes it more exciting that it matches up. Now, on those, they average approximately $226 on return per doe. But the difference is, and again, this is a moving, fluctuating span, okay, relative to revenue, relative to expenses. And there's no doubt that that's not true, okay, that it's going to shift and it's going to move and prices are going to increase, okay. But I put this in here and tried to summarize as best as I could for you without you having to look up the Ontario cost of production information there. But the ration and protein supplements, okay, of our feed, and again, these are all, actually these right here are all of our direct expenses: salt and mineral, milk replacer, vet drugs, AI fees, milk house supplies, milk transport, marketing, and then, so all of those are our direct ones. Our crop expense, because then they actually focus that not all of our resources or feedstuffs are going to be purchased. Some of them we're going to make, okay, or have on our operation of other crop expense. And then lastly, our indirect or overhead expenses. And so those added up to just shortly under $900, okay? And so in the eights there, and in it, again, returned potentially 200 and some, all right, a doe. So if I have, let's just call it $200 profit, all right, times 100 does gets us to 20,000, right? Okay, 20,000 is a little less than what we would prefer for an income of our world. Now that's a different when it's a subsidized portion, or that 100 does is just part of our operation because we have our corn and soybeans hanging out over here, okay, or whatever it may be. But certainly, again, on cost of production and being able to make that happen, we have some things that we can try to accomplish. So in summary on this, monitor and evaluate how your farm and business plan is working, again, from a production and financial performance. Set standards, measure performance, and then compare those. And if you're below where you want to be, okay, what can we do to be right, okay? And so again, from a cost of production, I challenge you to identify those benchmarks that you can improve on, and that's not decided by me. In fact, that's potentially decided by you and your colleagues or siblings or family members or workers and everybody involved on identifying what you want to accomplish. Good news, first week of January, you know, they call those like resolutions, all right? You don't have to do that. Maybe let's call them production goals and identify what can we do just a little bit better. Okay, I'm going to shift some focus. Any quick questions on our cost of production? Yes, sir.
With the cost of production on there, you talked earlier about your paying yourself. How come it's not in there?
A good question, okay, and so how come it's not in there? I would take that to the Ontario Goat Federation. I don't know, and in fact...
We did the research on our pricing, right, but we don't tell ourselves how many hours we spend on one goat. Mm-hmm. We should almost look at that.
Okay, and so I think in that it says, the question is that we could look at how many hours is in there, okay? And I dug through it a couple different times, but I think it was either 1.6 or 1.8 hours per goat is what they presumed. Now, to me, is that over the year? I would presume that to be what would be. So they calculate 1.8 hours. Correct me, but it's pretty close. So they do put that. Now you have to identify what your value is per hour. I totally agree, and that's a very large challenge of this from a production standpoint, is identifying what the cost of your labor is. Any other question? Okay, good. So I'm going to touch on just a little bit here on focusing of our end product, all right? And so I throw these three slides in here looking at primarily muscularity. And in fact, from a price reporting standpoint, at least in the United States, this is how it's evaluated, because you can evaluate weights of animals, and then you evaluate selection 1, selection 2, or selection 3. If I have meat-type goats, okay, they're boar influence, I would say that 60% of those goats that are raised would be in selection 1, maybe even a little bit more, okay, of ones that have some muscle and have some product to them. Those are ones that have, again, maybe more merchandisable approach for potentially our ethnic markets. We talk about that. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But, again, it's from a meat to bone ratio, and there is some muscularity in its top line and then through the center and lower parts of its leg. Here's a more average goat. Okay, again, maybe one that relative to a meat goat or a more influenced goat is probably on the lighter muscled group of that sector of our industry. But again, those would be selection 2, or at least that's how we evaluate them in the United States for us. And medium amount of muscling, and again, somewhat. All right? This one would be a selection 3. Okay? And so more of those that are potentially a dairy focused, but I think some of the dairy ones could push up into the selection 2, okay? Let's be real, this one is a light muscled one that is somewhat emaciated as well, okay? And so this one's farther behind than where we would prefer. Now, relative to market, again, differentiation at those auction barns primarily, we can be able to have the example, those of the selection 3 that are quite a bit lighter muscle. And in fact, obviously, we wouldn't expect the same price for these as we would in a meat goat portion of a boar goat influenced part. Now, as we talk about it, and again, when you identify more so on a dairy milk portion, you have an idea of some of those objectives. More so as I move throughout this presentation and finish up, is probably a little bit more focused on the meat goat portion or aspect of it. But knowing who the competition is, okay? In fact, from a milk standpoint, we know that that competition is potentially imports. And again, as I said, that's a realm that I'm used to in comparison of U.S. lamb production. Finding new customers, okay, and to be able to evaluate that. If you're not happy with how it's working from your standpoint, is there opportunities, okay? And again, since I'm now a local and I throw around slang like GTA, all right, that's where our market is, okay? And so the greater Toronto area, in fact, I was told, I think the number was 7 million people in Toronto, okay? I don't know, you guys can tell me right or wrong at a later point, but that's pretty close, right? And in fact, I'm not convinced that 7 million of those people all consume lamb, but don't worry, okay? If 1% of those consume goat, all right, then we only got to get 70,000 people fed, okay? Goats. So if we shift that, there's obviously, and I think that you're aware of that, and to the best of my knowledge, as your market structure is that a lot of those meat goats or goats for harvest shift towards the south. Can we find new markets, okay? Can we open new markets? I'll talk about it a little bit later, but those farmers markets are real. Improve the exposure to our market. Can we improve customer service? And hopefully, can we increase our profit margins? So if we're marketing to a target clientele, again, I told you that we had to have our goals, and this one might be just as important as that one, is identifying who we want to market those to. If we are looking at it, okay, is there some health aspects on a similar amount of protein in front of you, okay? Goat has less fat in comparison to its protein contemporaries, all right? There is some, no doubt, and that's not limited to those in terms of the ethnic populations, but a lot of goat is consumed. In fact, as you're probably well aware, that most says that goat is the most consumed protein or meats in the world, all right? Dairy goats, and if we look at it from a dairy goat of having some advantages from those that are lactose intolerant, potentially gourmet consumers and their shinier goat cheeses that we do have, maybe it's about soaps, okay? And so identifying what our clientele is, what can we be just a little bit better at trying to accomplish. I think, again, I wouldn't be able to tell the same story of goat production without throwing this slide in, all right? And so as long as you don't, and again, my research was actually more so in terms of lamb quality across America, and so if you don't look very hard, all of those lamb loin chops are goat loin chops, okay? And so I have the pictures small enough that you can tell that's how it is, all right? And so on my goat ethnic marketing slide, all right, that this is, that's real, okay? And I can say those synonymous because it's a very similar group of consumers, okay? It's a very similar group of consumers of whether that's a halal market, This was a Greek restaurant. Here's a retail location. And in fact, what I've found, and particularly in those butcher-type stores, and again, you can tell me as well, but in those bigger cities is that it's just cut into quarters, okay? The rack is the same price as the shank, is the same price as the shoulder, and in fact, if you buy it kind of cut up in a bag, okay, they just throw it through a slicer and you get cube chunks of meat, bone, excitement, all right? That you can make into a stew or whatever you so choose, all right? And so difference is relative to quality, but I'm not saying all of those are particularly quality driven, but we do have some. I have to throw this in here, and again, it's kind of that shift as well. And if you decide that we're going to focus on building your clientele, because I just told you to identify your target audience and identify your clientele, that we need to know who they are and how they can do that. What I'm most familiar with, you have to have a license and have a location that is enclosed and that you can get rid of the digestive tract and your viscera from those animals if you were to have on-farm slaughter, okay? You would have to work with your Department of Health or groups to be able to evaluate what it takes in terms of licensing here, okay? And in fact, I'm not exactly convinced that Hanover has enough people to accomplish it, but I'm relatively certain that Elmwood, okay, doesn't, all right? In terms of having enough of a core customer group. Now, if we were shifted farther south, okay, maybe there's a lot more opportunity, okay? But we had in Bismarck, North Dakota, all right, a couple was contacted because they were called to the building where a man and a woman had killed a sheep as part of a religious act, all right? And in fact, there were no charges filed, primarily because there wasn't anything on the book that says you can't whack sheep in a parking lot, okay? So I guess they weren't unlawful, but this is something that's real, and I really, really think it is in terms of being able to capitalize on that, because there's people, and I didn't touch on it too much on here, but there's people that want live animals, correct? Okay? Because they want to harvest them their own way and at their own location. And so that's certainly a large part of it, that then the responsibility is no longer in your court, okay? So if you harvest things on your operation, okay, you need inspection in order to be able to merchandise those, okay? But if you sell a live animal and it perishes somewhere else, at least the liability isn't on yours. I want to touch through a few marketing factors, and we'll open this up and still have some time for questions, so I'm excited about how it's moved along. But this is a picture that was just way too cool. I lived in Fort Collins, Colorado for 12 years, and this lady, she's there to get her meat at the meat case, and I just thought it was too cool. Maybe that's the people that we're supposed to aim for, okay? Those that live outside the box, all right? I'm relatively convinced that this lady lives by her own rules, all right? But I think that's important, because if we were to market the same things that we market the same way the next year, are we going to see improvements? Potentially not. Seasonality of our product. Goat's a seasonal product, okay? So is lamb, right? Goat, most of them are born, right? When? Spring, okay? Most of them are ready. Similar time, they're all born. Now, one of the things that's most important in the goat evaluation as we talk about this is that identify those holidays, right? Okay, and so holidays from the different ethnic populations. So in fact, understanding the people that you have in your area and being able to identify if and when those are worth some. In fact, we had some sheep that, in September that were smaller, 70, 80 pound, kind of more muscular, stouter ones that would go into the ethnic trade, and there wasn't an outlet for them. Nobody needed them. Their next big holiday was in October. Darn it. Okay? So we kept them for another month so that they were worth a little bit more. So identifying the seasonality of our product. I throw this in here, and again, from a true economist standpoint, they would laugh at me and say everything is elastic, okay? The price goes up, the demand goes down, okay? And so we would say that would be the way it is from an economist standpoint. I consider goat relatively inelastic, and I don't even expect you to particularly know what that means, other than the fact that those people that want goat on a Sunday in April will buy goat, okay? And if they have to pay $300 for that 60-pound goat, they will pay $300 for that 60-pound goat. Why? Because we have goat on Easter. Okay, and so there is some portions of that if we can be able to find it. I told you that on a caloric standpoint, that goat does have an advantage, okay? From a consumption standpoint, particularly as I compare goat and lamb, all right? Lamb potentially can be stronger, or as I call more robust in its flavor, okay? Some call it whack, I don't know. But goat is obviously, in my personal opinion, a little bit sweeter, a little bit more welcoming or pleasant also. Promote our product and sell value. Know the market size for a product. How much can we sell? How can we improve in terms of our market communication? How can we improve in terms of networking to accomplish that portion of our product? And consumer preferences, okay? And so as we look at the consumer preferences, is that a young goat? Is that, there's also here, okay? So there are individuals that other than myself, all right, that prefer to, if they were to purchase a goat, want a 6-year-old buck, okay? So has anybody sold the old bucks to people? You're like, yeah, okay? And they knew that they wanted that. So you probably could have charged whatever you wanted back to the inelasticity of the price, but it probably wasn't worth much to you, okay? So maybe it was a win-win. But there's differences because if you can understand and know your consumers, there's some value to be able to merchandise it. I can't do a marketing talk without throwing in this picture because it's just way too cool. So this is a lamb shoulder chop as well, but what does it say on it? Okay, I know I did cross, and I made it through customs, all right, legally, all right, but I'm relatively convinced no matter what country you're in, lamb is not hatched, okay? And so I couldn't do a marketing talk without throwing that in here. Just a couple slides, and we'll still have some time for some dialogue. So if we were direct marketing those goats and those animals, and again, I told you the second half of my presentation was more so on the meat product than the milk, but you could put it at the similar part, is identifying if you have quality goat or quality goat milk, all right? A processor, and that's the challenge most likely on pushing goat milk to goat cheeses or value-added products, okay? Because it takes the equity to accomplish that, okay? And I don't know, Bruce, many people that backyard make it into cheese over in the corner, okay? Maybe it happens, maybe it works for you, all right? And certainly there's some people, but I would expect that you would want to have enough volume that you could still be able to accomplish something. Pricing, all right, and from a meat standpoint, if you so choose, and that's why from selling goat, it's best to merchandise the whole animal or the whole carcass. Because once then you start deciding, oh, I'm going to sell goat racks. Well, for every goat rack that you sell, you have to sell the goat breast, the goat leg, the goat shank, okay, and the goat neck. And you have to make money on all of those. Otherwise, that goat rack just lost you a bunch of money. Okay, and so that's where, when working with direct marketing of people, makes it tougher. You can use a cut yield value calculator and identify what prices that you could put for those, and also knowing that milk quantity and quality. So the last one of the journey, start with a quality product, find a processor, minimize pre-slaughter stress. If you were to merchandise those, cut selection is important, okay? Fabrication and packaging, product labeling, okay? So then you can identify what your cool name is, all right? Uncle Joe's Goat Farm, I don't know, whatever makes you happy, okay? And marketing those and then meeting customer expectations. So we can be able to merchandise those goats and merchandise those products. I truthfully believe that now more than ever that it's critical and important that our connection with our farmer and rancher from our customer standpoint. Our consumer base is as far away from agriculture as it's ever been. I want to touch base on there. I've been so excited of the diversity of agriculture that I've got to see here in Gray and Bruce counties. It's awesome in terms of what you guys accomplished, but the connection is extremely important and extremely critical, and in fact, I believe that local, and research has said that local means, this is awesome, local means anything the consumer wants it to, okay? If they want organic, And you're like, yeah, I'm just down the street over there, all right? Yeah, it's organic-ish, okay? If they want, animal welfare or antibiotic-free, and like, oh yeah, I got it from, Slim down the road. Oh yeah, that's cool. It's antibiotic-free-ish. Okay? If they make that connection with the producer, they hold that much more value in what they expect from the product. Okay? And so, again, I think that this is not a niche. It's going to be real. Farmers markets are going to keep continuing to crank. And from no matter what our product is, again, I told you you're going to make goals. I told you that we're going to look at cost of production. We're going to be able to evaluate where we can be and how we can get better. But whether your product is milk, meat, okay, or fiber, do you know what your bullseye is? And most commonly, and that's why I like giving this talk and this presentation with groups, is that most of the time you leave and like, I don't know what my bullseye is. Or I do, but it's not on paper. Okay, and until it's on paper, until you can identify those benchmarks, we don't know how we're going to get there. We don't know if we can do it consistently. And since I'm trained as a meat scientist, I think with the end in mind, okay? And so I think of having a good steak or good goat chop and then say, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to make that a little bit better? So that's my thoughts, and we still have some time with your permission, Lori, because I left some there for some discussion and on topics of interest for you. So if the worst case scenario, I hopefully provide you to think a little bit.
Just raise your hand if you have a question. Such a good job, they don't have any questions, Travis.
I doubt it. So who thinks that, who has success stories on selling some goat meat or live goats to processing? Awesome.
So I'm retired, dairy farmer. We have somewhat of a mixed farm. From time to time, we get into some stuff to keep our kids busy. And one year we raised a bunch of kid goats, and the girls were awful happy when the check came in because that gave them a little start on their tuition fees. Anyhow, I got some advice from one of my sheep neighbor farmers, and he said, make sure when you sell them that you call me before you're going to sell them. And Sugar Feast that year was in September. And we marketed them, I think it was right after the Labor Day weekend. And my good neighbor Ron Preng, he's a sheep farmer, and done this sheep and goat markets are somewhat alike. And he said, always when you have goats and lamb to sell, he said, make sure you have them when nobody else has them, and when you have a feast coming up. And I saw on your list there are Buddhists and Hindus and Muslims, but our Jewish brothers and sisters, they certainly are looking for that type of stuff. And if you don't know how to market or what to market, you look in the book of Exodus, and it is exactly spelled out what the Jews want. Like they want a small lamb, enough for one family, and that they can eat before sunrise, I believe it is. But in any case, there is, I think there's some opportunity there. But it also, what I learned when we have our girls raise those kid goats is that we found it hard to get them started on milk. Sucking the mom is no problem, but feeding them out the bottle is a different story. And there is a distinct smell to goats, special billy goats.
Thank you.
So thank you. I totally agree that it's best to have the sheep and goats when nobody else does, right? Okay. And in fact, that fits very closely with the seasonality, and that's what makes it tough. But I totally concur with that. On the tougher part on getting those goats to try to be on the milk replacer is, and my experience, at least from some standpoint, whether right or wrong, is that people make the decision of, hey, I have, this goat has triplets and had been trying for 3 days or whatever, and she's not going to be able to make it, and they pull that one off or sell it to somebody else, is that from my previous experience, if you have 3 or have 4 or whatever that may be, on those goats, is to not even allow them the opportunity to suck off. We'll get some colostrum first, okay? So have some colostrum available, but then to teach them and start them on the bottle as quickly as possible, and so that you can keep them motoring, that's all they know. But I almost screwed that one up. The colostrum is also very, very important.
So any last minute questions?
Well, I'll be here throughout the day because I'm just, going to finish my vacation here in Elmwood and be here tomorrow. But I appreciate the chance to be here. Thank you very much, Jillian.
All right, thank you.